When Predator 2 hit theaters in 1990, audiences thought they were simply watching a sci-fi action sequel set in a concrete jungle instead of a real one. But what if the cast and crew were actually crafting something far more prophetic? A vision of Los Angeles that would become eerily accurate decades later? What if the details hidden in plain sight throughout the film, from its depictions of gang warfare to its prescient view of militarized police forces and urban decay, weren't just creative choices, but a window into our future? What if the movie's commercial disappointment masked what would later be recognized as a groundbreaking expansion of the Predator mythos? Let's pull back the curtain on the film that was judged harshly in its time, but has since been reappraised as a cult classic that deserves its place in the pantheon of sci-fi action. Let's uncover the production secrets, performance choices, and hidden details that most fans have never fully appreciated. This is the story of how Predator 2 secretly predicted our modern urban landscape while establishing the foundational elements of a franchise that continues to thrive today, the detail that changes how you see it forever. Predator 2 emerged from the shadow of its massively successful predecessor, which had cemented itself as one of the defining action films of the 1980s. The original Predator had been a runaway hit, combining military action with alien horror in a steamy Central American jungle. But as the 1980s drew to a close, the creative team faced a crucial question. How do you follow up a film so perfectly contained? The answer came in a bold pivot. Rather than retreading familiar territory, producers Joel Silver and Lawrence Gordon, along with writers Jim and John Thomas, made the decision to transpose the hunt from the natural jungle to an urban one. The year was set as 1997, then the near future, and Los Angeles would be depicted as a city on the brink of collapse, baking under a record heat wave, with drug gangs waging open warfare in the streets. Director Stephen Hopkins, fresh off A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, was brought on to craft this vision. It was a gamble that fundamentally recontextualized the franchise, moving from a story about military masculinity to one about urban decay, racial tensions, and institutional corruption. The brilliant conceptual leap suggested that, to a predator, a crime-ridden city would make just as appealing a hunting ground as a guerrilla-infested jungle. We wanted to flip everything on its head, Hopkins revealed years later. The first film was about this group of hyper-masculine soldiers being hunted in nature. We wanted to show that the predator would be equally at home in what we humans consider civilization. But this creative direction would face its first major challenge before filming even began, and it would change everything about how audiences would ultimately receive the film. Danny Glover was not the action hero. Audiences expected to see facing off against the predator. After Arnold Schwarzenegger's iconic performance as Dutch, the muscle-bound commando who survived through sheer physical prowess and tactical thinking, Glover represented a dramatic pivot. At 44, he was older, less physically imposing, and best known for playing the family man, Detective Roger Murtaugh, in the Lethal Weapon series. Everyone expected another muscle-bound hero, Glover admitted in a 2010 retrospective interview. But I was bringing something different to the table. Harrigan wasn't supposed to be a super soldier. He was a cop who'd seen too much. Tough, sure, but vulnerable in ways that Dutch never was. On screen, Glover portrayed Lieutenant Mike Harrigan as world-weary but determined, a veteran cop who knew his city inside and out. Off-screen, the actor was pushing himself to physical limits few knew about. Despite his everyday man appearance compared to Schwarzenegger, Glover performed many of his own stunts and trained intensively to prepare for the role. Danny would be there before everyone else, training, getting ready, co-star Bill Paxton recalled. He knew he wasn't what people expected, and that drove him to prove everyone wrong. The contrast between public perception and private dedication created what cast members called Glover's Gambit, leveraging the audience's underestimation of him against the character's own underestimated position within the film's world. Harrigan is dismissed by federal agents, overlooked by his superiors, yet ultimately proves to be the only one capable of confronting the predator on its own terms. But beneath the surface of this performance choice lay a deeper truth. Glover was carrying the weight of being the first black lead in a major sci-fi action franchise. The pressure to succeed wasn't just professional, it was cultural. And this pressure came with a physical and emotional toll that would manifest throughout the grueling shoot. The most pivotal moment in Predator 2's development occurred before a single frame was shot. Arnold Schwarzenegger, fresh off the massive success of the original film, was naturally expected to return for the sequel. The script was initially developed with his character Dutch in mind, continuing his battle with the alien hunters. But when presented with the urban setting and offered a reported $250,000 to read the script, a fraction of his then standard $5 to $6 million fee, Schwarzenegger made a decision that would reshape the entire film. He said no. When Arnold Schwarzenegger declined to return for Predator 2, his salary demands weren't the only factor. The actor was simultaneously shooting Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and believed the Predator sequel's shift to an urban setting was a creative misstep. Arnold's decision forced us to reimagine the entire approach, director Stephen Hopkins explained. Suddenly, we weren't making a direct continuation. We had to create something that could stand on its own while still connecting to what came before. This rejection catalyzed the most significant creative pivot in the franchise's history. Rather than trying to recast the Dutch character or find another muscle-bound commando type, the filmmakers embraced the opportunity to evolve. They would create a new kind of hero, older, more grounded, a cop rather than a soldier. The character of Lieutenant Mike Harrigan was born, and with him came a fundamental shift in the franchise's perspective. Where the first film examined military might against primal threat, the sequel would explore urban warfare, institutional corruption, and a more complex moral landscape. The Predator would no longer be hunting trained killers in isolation, but stalking prey in a densely populated urban jungle, where the lines between predator and prey, both human and alien, were increasingly blurred. Looking back, Arnold saying no was the best thing that could have happened. Production designer Lawrence Paul noted years later, "It forced us to expand the Predator universe rather than simply repeating what had worked before." This expansion would prove crucial to establishing the franchise's longevity. But first, the cast and crew would have to survive one of the most physically demanding shoots of their careers. The Los Angeles of Predator 2 was meant to be experiencing a record heat wave, with temperatures soaring past 109 degrees. What audiences didn't realize was that the sweat-drenched performances they witnessed on screen weren't entirely acting. The production itself became a grueling test of endurance that mirrored the hellish conditions depicted in the film. We were shooting in the middle of summer in actual downtown LA locations, remembered actor Bill Paxton, who played the cocky cop Lambert. Some days it really was over 100 degrees. We'd be in full tactical gear, running through buildings with no air conditioning, take after take. The infamous slaughterhouse sequence, where the Predator hangs its human trophies from the ceiling, was particularly brutal. Filmed in an actual meatpacking facility, the cast and crew endured the stench of real meat and blood while working with heavy prosthetics and special effects in sweltering heat. Danny Glover, carrying the film on his shoulders, pushed himself to physical extremes that few knew about at the time. Danny would finish these incredibly demanding action sequences and just collapse between takes, revealed Gary Busey, who played the mysterious government agent Keyes. Then he'd pull himself together when the cameras rolled. The man was a machine. During the final confrontation aboard the Predator ship, temperatures inside the enclosed set reached nearly 115 degrees. The combination of physical exertion, heavy costumes, and practical effects led to multiple cases of heat exhaustion among both cast and crew. The production design team, led by Lawrence Paul of Blade Runner fame, created sets that were visually striking but physically punishing. The urban landscapes were purposely claustrophobic and uncomfortable, with tight corridors and cramped spaces that left little room for camera equipment, let alone fighting an alien hunter. For Kevin Peter Hall, returning as the Predator after the first film, the urban setting created new challenges. The 7'2" actor had to perform complex stunt work while wearing a suit that not only weighed over 200 pounds, but also lacked ventilation. By some accounts, Hall would lose up to 10 pounds of water weight per day during filming. Kevin never complained, Hopkins said years later, but at the end of some days, they'd literally have to pour him out of that costume. This punishing production reality created an unexpected authenticity on screen. When audiences see Harrigan sweating profusely as he pursues the predator through an apartment building, they're watching a man genuinely pushed to his physical limits. But amidst this grueling shoot, the filmmakers were embedding details and mythology that would go unnoticed by most viewers for decades. For all the spectacle of its action sequences and creature effects, Predator 2 contains layers of visual storytelling that most viewers missed entirely. These subtle details, confirmed by cast and crew in subsequent interviews, transform how the film can be understood when watched with a knowing eye. The most significant hidden element appears during the trophy room sequence aboard the Predator ship. For a brief moment, the camera pans across a collection of skulls, trophies from the Predator's hunts across the galaxy. Among them, barely visible unless you're looking for it, sits the unmistakable elongated skull of a xenomorph from the Alien franchise. That was a last-minute addition, special effects supervisor Stan Winston revealed years later. We had been working on the Alien films too, and someone in the shop suggested we put a xenomorph skull in the collection. It was just meant as a fun Easter egg, not some grand plan for a crossover. Yet that single fleeting image would eventually spawn an entire sub-franchise of Alien verses. Predator media, novels, comics, video games, and eventually feature films. A momentary creative whim had seeded a multi-million-dollar expansion of both properties. Equally overlooked was the film's careful escalation of Predator technology. Each weapon or device the Predator uses is first shown being used against animals or criminals before being turned against our heroes, explained Hopkins. We were establishing a moral code through visual storytelling. The Predator isn't just killing randomly, it's following specific hunting protocols. Perhaps most missed by audiences was the deliberate visual motif connecting the Predator to Harrigan. Both are established as preferring to work alone. Both defy their superiors, and both are shown observing the city from high vantage points. The Predator perches on rooftops, while Harrigan is repeatedly framed looking down at the city from his apartment window or police station balconies. We were suggesting that Harrigan and the Predator are two sides of the same coin, cinematographer Peter Levy confirmed. Both are essentially lone hunters operating by their own codes in an urban jungle. That's why their final confrontation feels inevitable. They recognize something of themselves in each other. Now here's where things get complicated. These carefully crafted details were overlooked partly because of a much larger conflict brewing behind the scenes, one that would ultimately affect how the film was received upon release. The original Predator had pushed the boundaries of its R rating with its blend of military violence and alien horror. But Predator 2 was conceptualized as something darker, grittier, and ultimately more extreme. This creative direction set the stage for a protracted battle between the filmmakers and the Motion Picture Association of America, MPAA, that would fundamentally alter the film's reception. The first cut we submitted came back with an X rating, Hopkins revealed in a director's commentary years later. We were shocked. The violence wasn't gratuitous. It was establishing the brutal world that would make the Predator want to hunt there. The film's depiction of gang warfare, police brutality, and ritual killings, all before the Predator's own brand of ultraviolence enters the picture, created a perfect storm for ratings concerns. 20th Century Fox executives, already nervous about the sequel's darker tone, pressured Hopkins to make cuts to secure an R rating. We ultimately had to make over 20 different cuts, editor Mark Goldblatt confirmed, each time removing frames here and there, toning down the blood effects, cutting away slightly earlier from the impact moments. The infamous subway massacre sequence initially ran nearly 2 minutes longer, showing more explicitly how the Predator methodically stalked and eliminated each armed passenger. This uncut version has never been officially released. The result was a compromised vision that satisfied neither the studio's commercial concerns nor the filmmaker's creative intentions. Critics at the time noted the film's oddly truncated violence, scenes that built tension only to cut away at crucial moments, leaving audiences with a sense of something missing. Gary Busey, never one to mince words, was blunt in his assessment. They wanted us to make this urban nightmare with gangs, drugs, and an alien hunter ripping out spines. but then got squeamish about showing what that actually looks like. You can't have it both ways. This battle over the film's content extended to marketing as well. Fox executives, concerned about the film's extreme elements, pushed for a campaign that emphasized action over horror. The film's original tagline, "He's in town with a few days to kill," hinted at a more conventional action thriller than the hybrid of crime drama, science fiction, and horror that Hopkins had created. The fight over the film's identity would continue into its release, with critics and audiences alike struggling to reconcile expectations with reality. But the most profound irony was still to come, one that would take years to fully reveal itself. When Predator 2 opened on November 21, 1990, the results seemed to confirm the studio's worst fears. Against a production budget of approximately $35 million, the film earned only $57 million worldwide, less than half of what the original had generated. Critics were largely dismissive, with Roger Ebert writing that the film lacks the tension and suspense of the 1987 original. Audiences, expecting another Schwarzenegger-style action blockbuster, were confused by the film's darker tone and urban setting. The irony cut deep. A film about a misunderstood hunter, operating by its own code and unappreciated by those around it, had itself become the misunderstood hunter of the box office. "We knew we were making something different," Danny Glover reflected years later. "But the marketing sold it as more of the same. People came in expecting one film and got another. That's always a recipe for disappointment." The cast felt the sting of this reception acutely. For Glover, who had taken a significant career risk stepping into a franchise previously defined by Schwarzenegger, the commercial failure seemed to validate industry skepticism about his leading man status in action films. For the supporting cast, including Bill Paxton, Gary Busey, and Maria Conchita Alonso, what should have been a career-boosting blockbuster became a footnote. Yet in this apparent failure lay the seeds of an unexpected resurrection. As the film moved to home video and cable television, something curious began to happen. Divorced from the expectations of being a direct sequel to the Schwarzenegger original, viewers began to appreciate Predator 2 on its own terms. "I'd meet fans at conventions who would tell me they hated it in theaters, but loved it when they watched it at home," Bill Paxton noted in a 2008 interview. "Without the weight of those expectations, they could see what we were actually trying to do." The film that had been judged a failure by box office metrics was quietly building a dedicated cult following, one that appreciated precisely those elements that had alienated initial audiences: its darkness, its expansion of the Predator mythology, its vision of urban decay. And as years passed, another layer of irony emerged. The Los Angeles of 1997, depicted in the film, racked by gang violence, extreme weather, militarized police forces, and deep institutional corruption, began to seem less like science fiction and more like prophecy. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of Predator 2 lies in how it transformed a single film concept into a rich mythology with endless possibilities. Where the original Predator established the alien hunter as a formidable antagonist, the sequel revealed that there was an entire culture and history behind these creatures. The first film gives you almost nothing about where the Predator comes from or why it hunts, explained writer Jim Thomas. "It's just this perfect killing machine that shows up in the jungle." With the sequel, we wanted to pull back the curtain, just enough to intrigue, not enough to demystify. This approach manifested most visibly in the trophy room sequence, which not only established the alien/predator connection, but also revealed that predators had been visiting Earth for centuries. The antique flintlock pistol given to Harrigan, dated 1715, implied a long history of hunts across human civilization. The film also introduced the concept of predator society and hierarchy. The appearance of multiple predators in the ship sequence, showing deference to an apparent leader, suggested an organized culture rather than just random hunters. The ritualistic aspects of their behavior, from the trophy-taking to the honorable acknowledgement of worthy prey, painted a picture of a species with a complex honor code. We were building a foundation for stories that could go anywhere, different time periods, different settings, John Thomas explained. "Once you establish that these creatures have been hunting on Earth for centuries, following specific rules of engagement, The narrative possibilities become endless. The infamous City Hunter Predator design created for the film featured more elaborate armor and weaponry than the Jungle Hunter from the original, establishing that individual predators customize their equipment. This concept would become central to future entries in the franchise, with each new predator featuring distinctive weapons and armor styles. These mythological expansions would prove to be the film's most valuable contribution to the franchise. While Predator 2 might have disappointed at the box office, it provided the conceptual framework that would allow the series to continue evolving across multiple media. The Dark Horse comic series that followed drew heavily on elements introduced in Predator 2, expanding on the idea of predator clans, their history on Earth, and their complex hunting rituals. Video games embraced the urban setting and expanded arsenal of predator technology. Even the later films in the franchise would return to concepts first introduced in this initially underappreciated sequel. But the film's influence would extend far beyond its own franchise, rippling outward to reshape action cinema in ways that would only become clear with the passage of time. As the real 1990s unfolded into the 2000s, Predator 2 began to seem eerily prescient. The film's vision of 1997 Los Angeles, a city torn by racial tensions, gang warfare, institutional corruption, and extreme climate, began to feel less like science fiction and more like documentary footage from an alternate timeline. The 1992 Los Angeles riots occurred just 2 years after the film's release, with imagery that eerily mirrored scenes from the movie. Buildings ablaze, overwhelmed police forces, neighborhoods transformed into war zones. The film's depiction of heavily armed gangs controlling entire city blocks suddenly seemed less exaggerated, as did its portrayal of militarized police response. People started calling me after the riots, saying we'd predicted it all, Hopkins recalled. That wasn't our intention. We were extrapolating trends we already saw happening in the city. But the parallel was uncanny and uncomfortable. The film's vision of a city baking under unprecedented heat would prove equally prophetic. As climate change accelerated through the decades following the film's release, Los Angeles began experiencing exactly the kind of extreme heat waves depicted in Predator 2. The film's news reports of 109-degree temperatures, played for science fiction hyperbole in 1990, would become reality in subsequent decades. Even the film's vision of law enforcement found uncomfortable echoes in reality. The tensions between local police and federal agencies, the surveillance technologies, the military-style tactical teams, all would become increasingly normalized in American cities in the post-9/11 era. We thought we were making heightened reality, production designer Lawrence Paul admitted in a 2010 interview. Turns out we were just early. This accidental prophecy gave Predator 2 a second life as cultural commentary. Academic papers and retrospective reviews began analyzing the film not just as a science fiction action sequel, but as a text that had captured, perhaps unconsciously, the trajectory of urban American life at the end of the 20th century. For the cast, this reappraisal brought a certain vindication. People dismissed it at the time as exploitation, Glover noted. Now they study it in film classes as social commentary. Sometimes it takes distance to see what a film was really saying. This newfound relevance would contribute to the film's growing cult status. But equally important to its legacy was how it had quietly revolutionized the language of action cinema itself. Predator 2 may have underperformed at the box office, but its DNA would spread throughout action cinema in the decades that followed. The film pioneered a visual approach and thematic territory that would become increasingly dominant in the genre. Its blend of action, horror, and science fiction elements, moving seamlessly from police procedural to creature feature, presaged the genre hybridization that would become standard in the 21st century blockbusters. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Fast and Furious franchise, and countless others would later employ this same fluid movement between genre conventions.